And I've got two recipes to offer to you. One is what I call the weird recipe, and the other one is the wiser recipe. So we're going to play around with these words and see how we can go into something which I hope is meaningful at the end of the day, something that we are passionate from. So thank you very much. And I use this quote from Rumi that I think it is relevant for a long time. Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. All of us, I think, is clever in that sense, because all of us are wanting to change the world one way or the other. But yet he said today, I am wise, so I'm changing myself. Now, this is a stance that we've been taking. We say that everything is not right in the world, and we try to put it right. But the first question that I ask, are we ourselves in the right frame of mind? Before we mess with other people's problem, what about our own problem? Have we sorted our problem before we try to make a change in other people? So that's the kind of sort of viewpoint that I want to put across. What do we do with ourselves before we try even to change other people around the world? And this, again, the message that Rumi is trying to get across to us. Right, I want to start with this technology thing. I'm not anti-technology, but neither am I a believer that technology will solve all our problems, which is made to be as though that technology is a panacea of all problems. So the prophet of technology, Bill Gates himself, we are changing the world with technology. So we are talking about change, but the perspective of technology seems to be overwhelming us, especially in my part of the world, when we talk about 4IR and all the things that connect to technology. Even during this COVID-19, technology featured very well, as though that's a solution for tomorrow. And I'm going to find out whether, we're going to find out whether this is going to happen as a kind of a futuristic outlook for us. So that's where I think the word weird comes in. When we try to change everything with technology, I'm going to use this as a kind of an acronym that I created some way back when we try to understand what is this education system that we are going through from education point of view. And the word view has a number of meaning to it. Yeah, W still westernized. Westernized not in the sense of location, but westernized in the sense of event. 300 years ago, when the Western world invented the first industrial revolution, and now the fourth industrial revolution, it seems this is a dominant sort of way of moving forward. IR1, IR2, IR3, IR4, and there'll be more IRs. Yeah, and this seems to be the frame of mind. Words change, but everything else remains the same, and I'll explain that a little bit more. In the sense that everything is economic centric. Education is all just about economics now. You produce human almost like a factory, and the industry to tell us what to do, what to teach, what not to teach. Philosophy is not interested. Futures is something they say, well, they may be important, but not that important, because they know where they are going in terms of their bottom lines and their profits and stuff like that. They're talking about reputation. Reputations means how much money they make, where are you ranked in certain things. Everything now is ranked, even things that should not be ranked are ranked. At the end of the day, we produce a very dehumanized, a very discriminative sort of society, and also a mindset. And that's where the word weird comes from. It is westernized, economic-centric, industrial-led, reputation-obsessed, and also dehumanizing. I've not been happy with the university and the education system in Malaysia, and I think throughout the world, people are feeling this now. Now, what do we do with this weird thing? So what do I mean by it? Let us look at this industrial revolution per se. Many people talk about the Industrial Revolution as a kind of an episode, 1, 2, 3, 4. Now we talk about Industrial Revolution 4, but we do not know what's happening before that. And I will remind you, of course, they bring a lot of benefits. People say that this is the one that lift up thousands or millions of people out of poverty, but we often forget what it doesn't do. It pollutes the earth. Right, with steam engine, you can see the kind of smoke coming off steam engine, the thousands of them. And then we move to the second revolution. We talk about factories, mass production, more smoke, yeah, and more pollution. And this pollution stays until now. 300 years ago, global warming, climate change wasn't there, but it's now here because of the 300 years of spewing the smoke, and nobody actually is doing much about it. I don't know whether we can do about it, anything about it. Yep. So IR3 comes in, we say, okay, let's get rid of the smoke, produce a clean industry. So we do bring the clean industry with all this technology, but we produce another problem of depression, anxiety, suicides, addiction. Yeah, all this comes into play as part and parcel of the price that we pay for another set of. We probably minimize on the pollution, not successfully, but we created another problem which is very human in its nature. And then we move on to the fourth industrial revolution. We have got now the virus coming in. We have got ideas of lockdown, not only physical lockdown, mental lockdown, emotional lockdown, and it adds on to the problems that we have created before this. So this is weird. So what is so weird about this? It's weird to me because at the end of the day, there's something that cuts across. Once it cuts across, is a question of human rights. When you have the Industrial Revolution, slavery comes in, exploitation comes in, women are forced to work, children labors and stuff like that. Capitalism moves on, and Marxism, socialism, all being introduced as a response to the Industrial Revolution. And over time, we find the injustices, exploitation, all this discrimination, the divides that we see today are all, I think, related to this. If you care to analyze them one by one, it becomes a world phenomenon now in terms of disparities between the rich and the poor. Now we introduce another one between the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated. Yeah. So we have got the problems of addiction now, a different kind of addiction to technology. Many countries are well wired, but they also have got addiction centers. And how do you win these people out of it? And finally, we've got this cloud computing that everybody sharing the same cloud, privacy becomes an issue, and so on and so forth. And we are facing now another problem of lockdown emotionally. And I think the suicide rates, the mental health problem just become emerging of and the pandemic. So we are creating, I guess, overall, a very inhuman society. On the surface, it looks good, we are successful, but generally, I think we are creating a society that is very depressive, very discriminative, and I think we will see a lot more of this as I go on, right? But this whole weird idea is not a new idea. I think we're already thinking of how do you, quote unquote, looks like a brain sort of indoctrination. In the year 2000, it was predicted in 1910, this is what's going to happen. Yeah, a professor just put in the book, somebody grind it and it goes into our head without much reading, without much thinking. We are just being indoctrinated that way. And it looks as though this is happening in a very different way, but the message perhaps is still the same. And I guess this is a weirdness that I sort of dissent from what we are going today. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, UNESCO are looking at what can we do next. Yeah, it talks about the futures of education to reimagine knowledge and learning that can shape the future of humanity and planet. We are quite involved in this in the last 2 years in trying to say what sort of world do we want from our point of view. What sort of a world do we want? Yeah, it's difficult to say what sort of world we want, but it's easier to say what sort of world that we don't want. The world we don't want is basically this weird world. All right, we want to change it. We want to modify it if possible, or we want to substitute. Yeah, and I think it's quite easy. I've mentioned this to you. What has happened, and these are the downside that I think we need to look into. If we cannot do this, then we need also to rework the kind of model or the kind of paradigm that we see through. And that is the kind of mindset that I've got when we talk about the fourth industrial revolution. That is us in the university producing students for the industry, a very, very kind of inhuman, soulless, lifeless sort of production that is going on in the world today, whether we like it or not. We need to market our students, we need to market our university, and we need to market ourselves also at the same time, right? I would like to quote this prophet of technology, which talks about something which is quite different what you're talking about today. He says, if you go back, everyone was poor. I mean, everybody. The Industrial Revolution kicked in and a lot of countries benefited, but by no means everybody, by no means everyone. Yet, I think our cliche today is no one left behind, or leave no one behind. That is part of the tagline of the Sustainable Development Goal. If Bill Gates does not believe that everyone can be brought in, why are we using technology to pretend that everyone can be brought in and no one is left behind? Yeah. At least from my point of view now, if you look at distribution of technology around the world, it's very uneven. Not only one, but millions of billions of people are left behind. In my country is one of those. In terms of connectivity, in terms of distribution of devices, in terms of learning and so on and so forth. So these are jargons that we use, but we need to make it real. To make it real, maybe we need to find another option. Maybe technology is not the best option as it were today. So how do you move away from this weird thing? He also mentioned this, while we are all very dependent, and I want to emphasize the word very dependent on technology. Are we very dependent on technology? It does not work always. I don't want to depend on something that does not work. Yeah. So what choice have we got if we know that technology will not work? How can we be very dependent on it? And I think this issue becomes an important issue now. We cannot be dependent on technology for the simple reason, I think we are not made for that. And there are these 6 A's that I like to talk about. Yeah, a question of availability of technology. If there's availability, if it's available, is it accessible? If it's accessible, is it affordable? If it's affordable, is it appropriate? If it's appropriate, can we use autonomously? But we know the world is not that now. The world is very ambiguous. The word VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and complex now is even chaotic, given the coronavirus, and finally, the word ambitious. So the positioning of technology as a kind of a futuristic solution is something that we question, and we want to find out whether we can have better solutions on that. Yeah, unless we ourselves become robots. That is the other thing. Yeah, there's a question that asks, do you want to be a first-class human being or the second-class robot? This university needs to ask. Do you want to produce good people or you want to good machines? And there is a dichotomy between this, the way we run our education system today. So bridging the gap is not easy using technology alone. These are concrete examples around the world. Yeah, you never are able to sometimes connect it. And this disconnection, I think, is where I think my issue is. This disconnect with the human being itself. We talk about technology in a very inhuman way, a very robotic way. We need to transform or become slaves of those robots. Then only we can move. But I think it's not my option. I want to remain human. I want everybody to remain human. And the technology should be there just to help us. Yeah. In 10 minutes, I hope I can clear this. So I go back to what you call Rumi said. Yeah, yesterday I was clever. We all were clever yesterday, and we want to change the world. But certainly, the moment we attempt that, we create a mess out of the world, and this is what it is today, right? It is the change is outside there, but almost very superficial. You go into it, and you see what's happening today. Just take the COVID environment. Yeah, the question of preventing the COVID is still debatable. We still use the word social distancing when we need actually social bonding. What we need is social bonding and physical distancing. Most of the part of the world are still using the word social distancing, and the social distancing is probably for leprosy in the 5th century when we do not have any choice. Even that terminology is not settled. Even the understanding of how do we prevent this. Some people say mask is okay now. In some part of the world, you use mask, they can even sue you. We have not even settled that. There's a disconnect. When you talk about the origin of the pandemic, we still do not know. Yeah, there's still conspiracy theory, political sort of propaganda, who starts us all this. We don't care about this because we want to know how to manage this. Until we understand the origin, we will not be able to do so. We talk about vaccine, yeah, choose life or choose the virus. We have got the vaccine, but the vaccine now has gone into this very weird thing, very much what I say. It's a Western problem because they are hoarding this. There's a very good article by British Medical Journal, the 16th of August, read it. It says, profiteering from vaccine, a crime against humanity. Some countries who have got excess vaccine now are disposing it. Rather than distributing to the third world or the world that is not needing it, they are disposing it because they want to make sure the price are sustained. right? So back to the economic agenda, and it's all led by the industry, the Pfizer, the Medet, and the Moderna. They are all into this conspiracy, as documented in the BMJ. And we become very dehumanized in the sense that 80% or 90% of the developed countries have got vaccination, or less than 10% in the developed countries. And now they're talking about the third booster. We don't even have our first booster in developing countries, yet the third booster is now being propagated somewhere else that can make. So the whole question of discriminative that I talked to you about, I can't breathe and we can't breathe in that situation. Our life sort of depends on it. So the weird situation still is very much alive in this particular context, right? So we go back to the second statement then, what Rumi said, I am wise, so I'm changing myself. So the change needs to come from you. It's within rather than without, and try to make a better world, as it were, until and unless you understand yourself and who you are, then perhaps we are still playing a game, as it was said today. So let's come back to this picture. What we need to do now is to forget this man, right? And look at what we think an alternative to this. The word wiser comes in. The whole thing must look in terms of the total picture. Not just the perspective of a different country, a different government. We need to talk a humanity kind of perspective, right? And where do you put it? And a very integrated way, so that there is no silos, there is no national thinking. Is a human thinking, has to be sustainable, based on ethics, and it has to be resilient. The moment it is really resilience, then you can see the ups and downs. We will be able to manage it. And what do you want to manage? We want to manage a future humanizing society, rather than inhuman society that we see today. We want to have that so that we can have a better sort of environment. What do I mean by humanizing? We need to cut down on this so-called industrialization, which is not good for us. I think we are over-industrialized. Some of things need to be cut down. It's nothing to do with human beings. It's more on economics. We need to move away from the Anthropocene age that we are beginning to talk about now, and created a very human-centric or a human-centered society. And hopefully, all the other negative parts of the industrialization could be tackled, become more human, with sympathy, with empathy, with compassion. These are the three values that we are adding on in trying to make us wiser. And this is what the university is doing today, in the kind of trying to produce a new set of values for the university to move forward. Okay, in the last 10 minutes, I will try to conclude. So how do you move now from weird to wiser? I think we have seen this. We need to transact between what is westernized in that sense, not a geographical sense, not a, I'm not anti-West, is what I'm trying to say. We need to look at the world as a whole. Humanity as a whole, these are human beings, they are the same, and we need to find out the solution for everyone. Unless one person is vaccinated, then everybody is vaccinated, then the whole world will not be safe as such, right? You want to look at, rather than economic centric, look at from an integrated point of view, not from the outside in, but the inside out. How do we integrate ourselves, our being as a human person? Yeah, the heart, the hand, and the heart, and working together so that we become, quote unquote, a better human being, and that creates a better solution, not just for an economic purposes or other sort of purposes, while we dispense with the planet and everything else that we depend on for our livelihood in the world today. Rather than being industrial-led, we need to be sustainable. All right, the whole sustainable agenda, but with a soul. In other words, there is a humanness in it. You don't do sustainable development because we can rip off another set of a business. I know people use sustainable development to increase their profile as another business. They use the word green. Green is hardly sustainable in some sense. How do you put in the values that we talked about? Sympathy, empathy, compassion, humility. All these are words that comes in when we want to talk about sustainability with the soul. Rather than be reputational obsessed, you want to work on ethics so that we can be self-directed. We know where we are going, given the set of values that we share universally, human with a human person around the world, including the non-humans, including the animals, including the trees and the plants and so on and so forth, rather than become dehumanizing. How can be resilient? I mean, there are times and ups and downs, but how do you then bounce back rather than remain suppressed and remain sometimes colonized by some of these ideas that do not sort of gel into our own culture, our own civilization, and our own norms. Yeah. So this weird is when you just talk about technology and how do you move into this wiser world, or a wiser self, a wiser thinking, and how do you then becomes learning to become wiser, sustainable, all the values and that I talked to you about. And I envisage if we do this well, we'll create another rainbow for the future, a very colorful, diverse, cohesive future that all of us can share and benefit from. Yeah? And from where Rumi comes from, when you talk about learning to become, he talks about peace, he talks about, unassuming way of life. And he said this peaceful is the one who is not concerned of having more or less. I think our concern now is about just having, not about living. Yes, some have more and their life is terrible. Unbound by names and fames is another reputational obsess I was talking about. He is free from sorrow, from this world, and mostly from himself. I think the problem is us. I think Peter Drucker said this very well. The issue of technology is not a technical issue, it is a human issue. We have not resolved this, and we think the solution is outside. I think the solution is inside. 2 more minutes, I'll finish. So Rumi also said this, the earth turned to gold in the hand of the wise. So can we be that hand that then changes the world into what it ought to be? With so much thing around it, and we are not sharing it well, we are not working it well, and the world just becomes, a place that is chaotic. Can we turn it into the goal that we are supposed to do? But that only happens if you have this wise sort of idea. Okay, my last statement is this: when Rumi asks all of us and you, when will you begin that long journey into yourself? Are we beginning, or are we thinking about it, or are we still thinking journey to somebody else's country, somebody else's house, and somebody else's mind rather than our own, which has not been sorted out? So on that note, I thank you very much. Happy cooking for the future, and I hope you have benefited from this small presentation of mine. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Greeting of peace.